The reason that right in the big middle of myths, I wanted to tell you about the first 4 minutes is because myth number 6 is a great relationship lets you vent all of your feelings. And that is just not true. You see, there's this myth that if you're in a relationship and you're being authentic and you love each other and you care about each other, that you ought to be able to say anything you want to say. I mean, you're being truthful, right? Wrong. You still have to be civilized. Just because you have the license to vent doesn't mean that you should. Because if you think your partner is going to forget mean and hurtful things that you have said or done, they might forgive it, but they will never forget it. So this whole attitude about, hey, I can say anything I want, it's okay, it's authentic, it's real, I can vent. There's a huge difference between being genuine and being brutally honest. And you remember we've talked about this. Being genuine conveys your real sentiment. Being brutally honest means you're doing it in an uncaring and unempathetic way. You're doing it in a savage way. You're doing it in a way that takes into account your need to vent, but not the impact it's going to have on the other person. I want to give you a really good example of this that's very real life. I told you that I was in private practice for a long time, and I did my share of marriage counseling. I just wasn't very good at it. It wasn't that I didn't know what to say or I didn't know what to do. It just was that I didn't have the patience for saying and doing it. I just thought people ought to learn and change a little faster than they were prepared to learn and change. But I was dealing with a couple, and I'm going to change the names to protect the guilty. I'm going to call them George and Karen. There's a concept here that I want you to learn. It's called outrageous overshadowing. Outrageous overshadowing. Think about those words for a minute. Outrageous overshadowing. What could that possibly mean? Well, outrageous overshadowing is when you do something that is so over the top, so outrageous, that it gets so much attention that it overshadows anything they may have done. Now, I was working with a couple, George and Karen was, let's just say she was a little paranoid about his being flirtatious. And I say a little paranoid because she saw a problem with everything he did. That was not realistic. But there were problems with some of the things he did. I mean, he did flirt some of the time. He did like attention from women, and he did kind of bask in that some. But they would go to church, and she would be jealous of Sister Margaret. Honestly. I mean, it didn't matter what he did. He could be at a stoplight, and a good-looking girl could pull up in the car next to him, and she would think it was planned in some way. And again, not to say that he was a saint, but she was so hypersensitive to it that she really lost all credibility. It was kind of like the little boy that cried wolf. Every time something came up, she made a huge deal out of it. And she might have been right 1 out of 20 times to a degree. I don't think he ever actually had an affair with anyone, but people have asked me many times, Dr. Phil, how do you define flirting? When does it cross the line? There's a real easy definition for me. If you wouldn't do it with your partner standing there, then it's crossing the line. If you're chatting up some guy or some guy's chatting up some cute girl at work, if you wouldn't do exactly the same thing with your wife or husband standing there, then that's probably crossing the line. That's just a real good way to judge that, in my opinion. But if you are so hypersensitive about it that it really has become a controlling, consuming jealousy, then you're hurting yourself and your partner. But she had made the decision one time that he had really been inappropriate at an office function. And, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 5 was okay, he might have been a 6 or a 7. He might have paid a little attention to a particular young woman that was kind of his fantasy. Didn't touch her, didn't go off with her, but certainly was offensive to her sensibilities. I think anybody that looked at the situation would have agreed. They had a blow up over this, and she kicked him out. While he was gone, she took green fluorescent spray paint and painted everything he owned with green fluorescent spray paint. Now, they call jealousy the green-eyed monster. I don't think it was an accident that it was green fluorescent paint, but she painted all of his clothes, suits, shirts, pants, everything. Then she took a butcher knife and she stabbed the heart of every shirt he owned, and then she cut out the crotch of every pair of pants that he owned. Now, he was a real stereo buff, and he had the most fabulous sound system you've ever seen in your life. So she took every bit of his stereo system, all of his electronics, took it into the master bath, put it into the bathtub, pulled the stopper shut, turned on the water with all the equipment in there, dumped an entire box of laundry detergent on top of it, and completely soaked it. Then she wrote things on the wall in his study where he had a home office that I can't repeat. So she's now cut all of his clothes up, painted everything green, taken all of his stereo system, soaked it in the tub, and by the way, left the water running, left the house, went and checked into a hotel. Now, that's what I call outrageous overshadowing. At this point, does it really matter whether he was talking to somebody too much at the office party or not? No. He's going to get a pass on that because what she did was so outrageous, so over the top, looks so insane that everybody looks at her and he gets a pass. If he had had this girl on his desk having sex with her, and she goes home and does all of this, all eyes are going to be on her, and everybody's going to say, oh, that poor man. Did she have a right to be offended? Did she have a right to vent her feelings? Probably so, but she went so far, and her attitude was, hey, that's how I felt. That authentically, realistically is how I felt. And I've always been told, if you can't be honest with your partner, what's the point? Well, whoever told her that, whoever gave her the idea that that gives you a license to violate your partner's space, to violate their property, to degrade them, to do all of these things to them, certainly gave her a bad message. The point's really clear. Before you say something, it could be disastrous. Before you do something that could be disastrous, before you say or do something that is not ever going to be forgotten, before you do something that is just going to be really hard to unring that bell, you need to really think about that. Because there are an awful lot of things that seem like a good idea at the time. You know, the old adage, count to 10 before you say something. That's so you can cool off a little bit. When he came home and found all of that, I still know these people. And I don't think he's over that yet because he knows what she's capable of. He knows how much she is willing to hurt him, how much she is willing to strike out at him. And it really doesn't matter what he did. Nobody talks about that. What they talk about is this insane woman that cut the heart and crotch out of his clothes, then painted them green before she destroyed all the things that he valued. And most people would say, man, if he wasn't cheating, he should. People start justifying unjustifiable behavior. The fact of the matter is he may have been inappropriate, and that should be dealt with. But because of this venting, because of this talking before you think, he just gets a free pass.